Welcome to the Movie Overload podcast, the film book club podcast thing, because I'm trying to add new things to the intro and it doesn't work. It's a podcast where we go through the 100 essential films throughout the history of cinema, from A Trip to the Moon to Parasite and everything in between. And also, we must mention fuck Woody Allen.
Heck that guy.
Can I get fucks all around for Woody Allen?
Heck.
I think you're going to get a 3/4 of the way around. Make a nice pie chart there.
It's good
On
enough.
the last day of this podcast, I'll give you a resounding.
I'm very excited.
Okay, yeah.
Heck that
waiting
guy.
for it.
It's going to be fun. Another note, as I've been looking back through the 100 essential movies, just to make this sure, we're not gauging the movies off of critical consensus or really anything other than what we decided on at the beginning when watching this, and may or may not be regretting at this point. And I hear that you had a hard time with Harakiri. Look forward to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Evil Dead 2.
Yay!
Those are on the list. I'm sorry.
Hooray.
Are those more?
Probably.
So
I haven't seen either.
they Evil Dead 2 is much more, but it's a comedy. But if you don't like blood,
I didn't know that I had a problem with blood. Usually I'm okay, and if it's a comedy, I'm usually pretty good at identifying special effects because of my theater experience. So I'm like, I'm not scared because that's just cornstarch.
So Evil Dead 2 is extra. I think you'll be fine with it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre you don't actually see any violence happen on screen, but it's
all in your
very
head.
good at implying. It is very good.
Sneaky.
It's kind of worse sometimes.
Meat hooks and such.
Okay.
I think what got me about this, and I was talking to our pigeon friend about this, because
We
the
didn't even
sound
introduce ourselves.
was especially hard
Oh,
to
heck to
process.
introducing ourselves.
Yes.
They all know who we are at this point,
Yeah,
unless it's their
sorry.
first episode, in which case, I'm sorry, this is your first episode. We have so much better to offer. You could start anywhere else, please.
This is, it's going to be great. We're like 5 minutes in. Not even.
One of us is Pigeon Friend, one of us is Anna, one of us is Aiden, and one of us is Hunter. And
Guess
you get to
who?
choose which is who.
Ooh.
Right. Anyway,
It's a
sorry.
Pigeon friend.
All I was saying was that the sound effect really got me, and the fact that it was suicide also got
The
me.
like the
So I actually,
ones or like the other ones.
I saw,
Was it more that
All of it, maybe.
that kind of thing?
it's a lot of sounds.
okay.
So I saw a really interesting review from Sally Jane Black, like one of the people I follow on Letterboxd. She's
cool.
great.
Yeah.
But she actually was like, I didn't want to watch this movie because it was gonna be really triggering for me, but it was a classic, so I knew I had to watch it. And I watched it and realized that it wasn't going to, because no one commits suicide in this movie. They're all
It's true.
Yeah.
I agree.
acts of societal murder, institutional murder.
I 100%
Yeah.
agree, and this is actually like a thing, because I mean, anybody who's talked to me at any length about movies has probably heard my rants about the way that suicide is used in film. I have some like very specific
controversial
problems.
ideas.
I don't know. I think that they shouldn't be controversial, but yes, it does lead to me disliking Dead Poets Society,
Which is valid.
which is controversial. But I also think that the way that it does it is solely for the purpose of like capitalizing on it, making it like some kind of emotional release for the viewer. And I don't think anything about Harakiri does that. And in addition to the fact that not only is it not suicide, because these are like essentially murders that you're seeing on screen, it doesn't do that, but it also isn't specifically using these scenes, these like gruesome scenes, in order to make you feel sad and emotional and like you've lost somebody you know somehow, even though you clearly haven't, and this is all manufactured. I think it does something almost, I don't know, I think it's the opposite of that.
Like
Anyway.
it's, I mean, obviously the one with the bamboo is like, it's kind of the method by which it ends up happening kind of accentuates how much it's more of a murder than a suicide, because it just, all of that scenario is highlighting just the cruelty of these people who are just like, hey, you said you were going to do it, so you better do it. And just, there's no good reason for it.
Well, and part of the thing that's really interesting, because I also decided to watch the 2011 remake by Takashi Miike because I saw it around Letterboxd, and I'm like, did they actually remake Harakiri? Yes, they did. The way that it's played in the original, the classic Harakiri, it's cruelty, but it's cruelty that is unseen by the people who are committing it. They don't realize that their actions are cruel, and it turns from apathy to mild anger to actual spite when they actually bring the body by. And you see like the people just at this point you see their progression from being just wanting to protect themselves from these Ronin who are taking these poor Ronin who are disadvantaged by society and trained to be warriors all their lives and then taken away from their livelihood. And they are taking advantage of these big houses of lords who aren't willing to give them small amounts of money because they're starving. And so they're like, no, we can't have people taking advantage of us. We're not chumps. We have to show that we stand up. And then they slowly are like, this, he's not honorable. He doesn't have proper swords. I hate him so much. I hate him so much. I am going to spit on his corpse in front of his father. You know, that sort of like it escalates there. And stuff.
It's good.
Stuff.
I think I have a little bit here about how it's political in that sense, because it's like it makes sense for now. I think it, even though what I think Kobayashi specifically talking about is not this exactly. I think it has the application to, like, for example, like if you don't see the comparisons to the samurai's treatment of Motome and the treatment of, like, by Republicans and the police of, like, BLM, then I don't know what to say for you. It's just it's a similar instance of, you know, not recognizing systemic issues leading to controversial actions, and instead just you know, having this self-importance and fighting against those who are committing these controversial actions regardless of the context in which they're being forced to do that in. Yeah, like people being like, oh man, I can't believe that somebody like broke into a Target. How dare they? And it's like, okay, well, what about all of these people who are being, like, literally killed in the streets? You know what I mean? Like, this is why this is happening. There's, like, it's being silent and doing nothing about it is not changing this in the same way. That's my little political rant.
Well, it's like this very absolute view of morality that is not contingent at all upon circumstance.
But it also doesn't take into account the morality of their own actions. It's only applying morality to the outside of the whoever's not in my specific group, because I mean, as you can see, the way that the samurai are operating, or the so-called samurai are operating within this compound, is like, if you're part of our clique, then, like, you're good, you're paid for, you're fine, you're honorable, you're whatever.
Well, it's equating a form of, you know, like, morality to the nature of the social order. What is within the social order we have is what is good. The social order is not questionable. Because
that sounds like Aristotle. It sounds like Aristotelian ethics. I don't know if any of you know anything about Aristotle, but that's kind of what he was, in a very brief paraphrase, that's kind of what he's like, hey, like, some people were born to be slaves. Some people were born to be women. Women are better than slaves. Sometimes.
But is his view then, like, is he saying that that's objectively the case, or is he saying that that's because of the way that society is?
It's, I think maybe he's more saying that that's objectively the case, and society has formed around that inherentness.
Gotcha. Okay.
So maybe it doesn't quite apply as much.
Well, although I think that idea, that sort of conception of morality, is the conception of morality of the Lord in this case, who is presiding over all of this. And when he is, when the samurai, our protagonist, of whose name I cannot remember because I cannot remember character names for the life of me.
Tsumugo?
Something like that.
Let me look it up. I wrote it in here.
So he comes in and he reveals that he has bested his 3 best samurai. And he believes that the samurai concept of honor is a farce, in a sense, because it is contingent upon the fact that their base needs are met. Because while they are not fearing for their lives and the lives of their family from starvation and from sickness, they have the privilege of being able to hold this moral ground. But when put in crisis, that morality will crumble. It is not absolute. That is his thesis, which he proves by showing the actions of the samurai after he has shamed them, by cutting off their top knot. And as he says, to a samurai, losing one's top knot is worse than death. It is not losing life, but losing face.
I also wonder, and this is just another theme that was introduced, is that the samurai's sword is his soul, and so watching sword, and so you have the bamboo sword, does that symbolize... At first I was like, oh, this kid is a coward. Duh, bamboo sword. But as soon as I saw that he had traded his sword for his family, I was like, oh my gosh! Get you a man that sells his soul to feed his family.
Well, and his father breaks down in tears, and he's like, why did I never think? I was so attached to this idea of my sword and how important it was. I never thought that I could sell it to save their lives, because if he realizes that if he sold his sword and used that money, his son wouldn't have gone off and tried to pull like a Harakiri scam that he'd been hearing about, like that stunt where he's like, it's been happening a lot. I just need some money for medicine for my dying baby. And so when they get to that final moment and he reveals that I've bested them, and what have they done? They have hidden like cowards. Your best soldiers are not honorable men. When they are put in crisis, their so-called morality will crumble. At that point, the Lord... Kill him.
Counselor!
Kill him, please. And then cover the whole thing up.
What if he
no one needs to know.
Make him die. I don't know what else to do.
I don't know why you said that, and it just sounded like the way Jared Leto would deliver that line. Make him die.
I'm going to go commit die now.
We live in a society.
I will. I have to die because I can't.
I thought I was I was forever free of that Jared Leto Joker. And then Justice League came along, the remake of the film that is the same film but different.
And is it wrong? Fellows, that I did not hate it this time around?
It's not wrong.
No.
You can enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. I still don't think it's great.
It's not great, but
great.
also
a lot of people liked it.
I
more
wish
than
they
the
kept
original,
the "we live in a society" line. Anyway, the reason why you guys are killing me is because you guys are talking about all of the things that I've literally been spending months writing about, and so it's like,
Can you please
but also
tell us about it?
Give
okay,
more context.
So let me start at the
Pigeon
beginning.
body,
I have
little birdie
some extreme
in the
thoughts.
sky.
Okay, first off, this, as we've talked about, it's not a suicide film, but also it's not a samurai film. And I think that's really important to note when we talk about this, because a lot of people watch this movie and watch Seven Samurai because those are the movies that are on the Letterboxd list or whatever. And they're like, I get samurai movies. And you only watched one samurai movie and you watched another that's very unique. So this is... First off, this is taking place in the 60s. This is when this is being made, which is a very, very different time period than the Japanese film movements of the 50s, very different from the 40s. Obviously, something like this could not have even been made in the 40s because it's sort of challenging some like feudalistic notions. It's challenging some of Bushido, and that's just would not have been acceptable in wartime. The film wouldn't have been made. Kobayashi would have been, it wouldn't have happened. However, that doesn't mean that this is just a controversial political take on a samurai film. This is very specifically part of this very fiery political movement of the 60s that was specifically anti-samurai. It's a completely different genre, just in the same way that you wouldn't compare, like, I guess I was thinking of like a movie like Pride and Prejudice that is set in the Regency era with a movie that is specifically criticizing the Regency. You wouldn't consider those the same genre just because they're taking place in a similar context. It's like that. A lot of these directors from this era, specifically, this was the thing, they would specifically be like, I hate Kurosawa. Like that was the statement at the time, by a lot of these, like, you know, more popular up and coming art house directors in the 60s, because they saw Kurosawa as not being political, and that was like really just the peak. That's the only thing that they're going for in the 60s, is just, how do I make this more pathos driven, more politically driven, and to be mad about some stuff that's bad. And they saw that Kurosawa did not do that. So I think it's really interesting. You could draw comparisons. You could try to, between Harakiri and Seven Samurai. I have some thoughts. But comparing this movie instead to something like Redbeard, which came out in 65, which did not get a lot of good critical attention, and was just considered very humanist to the point of not really having any kind of motivation, would be a more apt comparison. We have Kurosawa trying to essentially edit culture here and there, saying, I think we need to go for these ideals. I think we need to value these things more as a society, versus the entire, like, no, let's burn the entire place to the ground type of thing that Kobayashi is doing here. So again, I don't even think that what Kobayashi is saying is like, oh man, look at this specific group of people who are not being honorable, but saying essentially like, honor's not dead. Honor doesn't exist in this context. There's nothing about this system at all that has value. And I think that's why we also see specifically Tsugumo do the things that he does, in the sense of like, he's going around and he's sneaking up on these guys and chopping off their top knots. He's not really fighting them in a one-on-one duel. When he does do that one duel, which is not his intention that he started, he breaks his sword and then chops off his top knot. There's not a single point in this movie where there's actually any kind of, you know, honorable Bushido combat whatsoever. He's just entirely going outside of the rules to be like, guess what? Fuck you guys. Nothing that you're doing makes any sense, and it's bullshit, and it hurts people, and it's destroyed my life, and it's destroyed the lives of those that I love. And so I'm not even going to beat you on your own terms, which is something that I think a lot of Western audiences like. We kind of like to watch the guy come in and play the same, like by the same rules, and still beat them nonetheless, because, you know, just magically, thematically, you know, his heart was in the right place or something like that.
He's better at the rules.
Right. He's better at the rules. But no, this is that scene, I guess, which makes sense because we're talking about George Lucas, who like takes so much from all of this Japanese stuff. We're talking about, like, you know, Indiana Jones just like shooting the guy swinging around the sword, which also, to be fair, was not written in the script from what I know. They were going to do a duel anyway, but it's that scene. That's what this is I don't give a fuck. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And he does that in, I think, a lot of ways, but one thing that I want to highlight is the way that the camera work and the way that the editing and everything is constructed is, in my view, very specific. You're able to get kind of caught in Tsugumo's flashbacks when he's talking about his story, the previous story. You're able to kind of get invested and feel like you're involved in the story. But when you're actually at the samurai compound, the editing and the expansive shots and how pretty it is, and the music and all of the different things, the way that things cut around, very specifically show you that you're in a movie. And while it's beautiful and impressive, it's also showing that these characters, these you know, so-called samurai, are, you know, actors. They're just playing a role, and so you have to see that.
Well, the lighting through the whole thing, but specifically those sections, is very theatrical. You have very specific lighting angles you might see literally in a theater. one thing that comes to mind, even though it's in one of his flashbacks, the moment when the guards leave after dropping off his son's very dismembered body, not dismembered, but disemboweled body, the light goes down on the backstage, and a spotlight comes up on the body and them, just highlighting them just sitting there. Also, his daughter's teeth are black. I understand from things that I've heard that might have actually been a beauty thing in the period. But it is quite unsettling, especially when you aren't expecting it, and suddenly she just opens her mouth. No, the teeth are black. It's not blood. Because if you look at the earlier scenes when she opens her mouth, they're also black. Before that point, they're just black the whole time.
I didn't
She doesn't open her mouth that much. She doesn't have that many lines,
She spends
and
most of the time burying her face and crying.
or
Well,
coughing
she
up
also,
blood.
speaks from a distance sometimes.
Yeah.
To be fair, to our fine lady.
Yes. No.
But yeah, so all of it is really centering on the fact that when these people are around, they're very clearly in a movie. They're in a production. They're just kind of kids playing a role.
I mean, another strike against that is how structured they're. I noticed in the last scene, there was a clear rhythm. You could watch them I don't know. I was just watching the end scene. I was like, this is. You're clearly being signaled. You are moving in synchronous and with a specific rhythm that is consistent.
Right. Yeah.
It was like a
it's
dance.
so fascinating because I think it's something that's so easy to miss. When I first watched the movie, or the first 2 times I watched the movie, really, this was not something that I really paid much attention to because I was so into the fact that oh man, samurai stuff just kind of looks cool. Obviously this is not this is, obviously that's not the point of this movie and whatever, but it looks cool, and you're so invested in how different and unique this is from a lot of things that we normally see. That takes center stage, but this wouldn't have been, I don't think, the way that a lot of people would have read it at the time, because all of this is commonplace for this genre. I mean, again, I've talked about this on different episodes, but if you're tuning in now, there's a very specific split in Japanese film. I don't know if that's really the case now with modern film, but for a long time, Japanese the Japanese film industry has been so separated from every other film industry, really, that they have very, very strict genre divisions that we don't work with normally. It's very clearly split between the Jidaigeki and the Gendaigeki, your modern dramas like Tokyo Story and your Jidaigeki like Seven Samurai. And so within this there are so many of these period pictures that are trying to be accurate, that are trying to showcase Bushido and feudalism and all of this stuff, and it's commonplace to the extent that there was a pretty significant length of time in which there was a remake of the 47 Ronin coming out at least every year, sometimes multiple of a year. It's also just kind of a thing culturally, as a lot of these traditional stories are just told over and over and over and over again, and it's not exactly about iteration, it's not exactly about change, it's about telling the story again. And so we have a lot of this over and over again. So the differences in the way things are lit and the differences in whatever would have been, at the very least, more noticeable. I don't know if that's every person going out to see this film would be oh, he's subtly critiquing the fact that they're all just actors, but it's more there, I guess.
I wonder, is the subtle critique the horrible wigs? That was not so subtle.
That's just a thing in pretty much all of them. I will say that's one thing that I do believe Kurosawa has over Kobayashi.
Better wigs?
Better wigs.
Okay.
I will say
they were really bad.
They're generally pretty easy to miss with Kurosawa.
Yeah.
And sometimes
you could see the wig
wigs.
tape on close-ups and the little wires sticking out. I'm like, hey.
Well, I don't know if this is true or if this is just some weird garbage Orientalist thing that somebody wrote on Letterboxd that they weren't paying attention to the implications of what they're saying. But what I have read is that the the accuracy, the blendability of visual effects is not really that important. And hasn't been traditionally considered that important by Japanese audiences. Like, you could watch Shin Godzilla, for example, a movie that won all of the Japanese Academy Awards ever, and yet you watch it and you're like, how did this come out like 5 years ago now? Because it looks garbage.
Well, so there is a big thing, because I've seen a lot more modern Japanese film than you, history buff pigeon
I only watched
person.
the old ones.
Yeah. But
Shin Godzilla.
there is a major theme of the visual effects not needing to be textured, and in a lot of anime adaptations, they have like these really smooth 3D renders of like fantastical things, and you're like, are they just trying to resemble the anime style more? And then you see other films that aren't based off of that at all, and you're like, no. So the presentational nature of it seems to be not nearly as, argued over. Like, film nerds in America argue over, like, oh, Christopher Nolan films, they're so realistic. And when you show them something like the Wachowski sisters' Speed Racer, they're just like, that, what? This isn't realistic at all. And a bunch of people hate it on that reason alone.
Sad.
When there's a broader spectrum of what cinema can be than what any individual group might desire it to be and might base it off of. The angry film professor who thinks that David Lynch's The Straight Story is the perfect movie because it follows the perfect movie formula. Those vibes.
David Lynch. Is Eraserhead in this list? Because that was another movie. Fight Club, Eraserhead, and the first 35 minutes of this movie are three things that have made me so viscerally uncomfortable.
Ooh, yeah, I think I did you put Eraserhead on?
Eraserhead is in, Fight Club is in. Neither are movies that I've seen. I'm not excited.
Just both.
I haven't seen Eraserhead.
Eraserhead's a bit much.
Eraserhead's a lot.
Just
Excited.
do whatever you are morally comfortable with to get in the least encumbered state possible before watching that. If that requires like being sleep deprived or drinking a lot of soda or candy or drinking grain alcohol until you pass out, whatever it is, it's probably what you need to do. Whatever you need to do.
I love the way that you phrased that.
See, the
It's fun.
funny thing is, I'm usually crocheting while I'm watching movies.
I don't know if
feels like
that's
a
the
very
vibe.
sober
Anxiously
habit.
crocheting while watching Eraserhead. I was like, I hate this movie so much.
I feel like he would really like that piece of information.
That's probably true.
Huge.
Well, David Lynch would very much enjoy that. He hates it every time you go on stage and try to ask him what his movies are about, because I don't know what his reasons are. I think that it is a masterstroke of surrealism to deny the existence of an explanation because it's about surpassing, as with like other modes of filmmaking, it's about surpassing the conscious self and expressing itself within the unconscious self. The meaning of the movie is the feeling of the movie.
Which makes me feel ill.
I think it's supposed to. I think it's funny. The guy's head literally gets turned into erasers at one point.
Spoiler alert!
Oh, I'm sorry
Watch
for
yourself.
spoiling a surrealist movie that's been out for several decades and everyone knows exists.
I'm
the
glad
title.
I wasn't paying attention.
Good, because that's like
big deal.
the best part of the movie.
I'm
heard
excited
it
to
fully
get
and
to
I'm
it.
just
I
like,
don't know anything about it.
I think that's one of those movies you literally can't spoil, because even if you knew everything that happened in that movie, you would watch it and you would still be surprised.
Yeah.
I love those movies.
We're almost there, aren't we? We're
Yeah.
Coming up.
15, 20 weeks away.
Lord.
You say almost, but we still have to get through the entirety of the 60s, which you have loaded with 3-hour epic after 3-hour epic.
That's what the 60s are.
Bummer.
To
You're
me.
right. And you put them in. You put them all in.
And put them in a row.
And then we can wait a little
Get all
while
our
before
ducks
our
in a row.
next 3-hour epic.
We got a stack.
True.
We
Yeah.
got
When is our next 3-hour epic once we finish the 60s? I feel like it's not for...
oh, it's like a couple weeks after it, you know.
After, there's nothing in the 70s.
There is in the 70s.
What epic do we have in the 70s?
I'm gonna look up the list, but I was looking through the watch times. I'm like, oh, once we get through the 60s, we're fine. Then 2 weeks into the 70s, we have something that's almost 4 hours long,
I mean,
and I'm
we've
like,
got-
Wait, oh.
You've got Lord of the Rings at the
Yikes.
latest, but like I know that's several decades
Yeah,
past.
but we also have
between.
Brighter Summer Day.
True.
Oh, that
Mhm.
one's 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's the
oh
one.
yeah. You also have Andrei Rublev. I
Is
think
that in
that's
the
the
60s?
60s.
Yeah.
But where is our list?
Brighter
Brighter
Lawrence
Summer Day
Arabia,
takes
really long.
place in the 60s.
Sound of Music is long.
Is it?
Isn't it? I think it's long.
Yeah, it's pretty long.
Brighter Summer's Day is long.
The Sound of
Um,
Music is long. But I feel like some of them feel longer than others. Like Sound of Music is pretty action packed, but Brighter Summer Day, like, it's beautiful in this way, but it also is very slow.
Yeah, so
So it just
72
feels
we have
really
The Godfather, which isn't exactly
It's
short.
not. It's like 2 hours though.
Yeah, and then a few weeks after that we have Janan Dillman, 23.
Gene, yeah.
Yeah,
Is
you
that-
know-
I didn't know that was that's in the 70s.
The
That was in the
Godfather-
70s, and it's
That's
202
probably the-
minutes long.
Yeah, that's a long one.
The Godfather is definitely a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
It did not feel like it.
175.
Oh,
Okay.
that movie does move. It moves. It's new Hollywood. It is like pacing
It's paced really
and
well.
cinematography.
Like, I think that this movie that we're talking about now is... I'm curious what you guys thought. I know... I've heard some complaints about the pacing of this movie.
you know my take.
Is that it's slowly paced or well paced?
I think it's very well paced. I think it moves... I don't think it moves economically, but I think it moves deliberately enough that there's always a reveal of information. You're always wondering, especially in the first bit, who is it here that I'm rooting for? Who is the person that is honorable? What is the thing that I'm searching for here?
See,
I would agree.
both times I've watched it at the hour mark, I have either wanted to turn off the movie or have turned off the movie and taken a little break. The last hour of the movie, I think, works hard. But after the first Harakiri and then up to the hour mark, that like 35 minute stretch there just drags for me interminably. It feels like I've been watching the movie for years.
Okay, this
I
needs a
think
vote.
for me, I think the pacing as well, like if you just look at this movie, for me it was emotionally dragging, I guess. I don't know, to start with something so raw. And I've been thinking about what you said about using a person's suicide as an emotional release in a film versus this, which is a murder and you're not really emotionally connected to this character at this point. It just kind of happens, which I think might have been part of why it caught me so off guard and made me feel so weird. I think partly because I didn't have this emotional connection. And so my mind was like, Anna, you're watching somebody die and all you're feeling is sick because it sounds bad. Like that kind of like disconnect too.
Sure.
But I feel like because it started with that, my emotions and my mind were being weighed down by thinking about the film and thinking about the implications and thinking about what it means for honor to drive you to, I guess, murder.
Yeah.
I guess is that.
Well, that's
I think that's a really
the
fair
fascinating thing about it. Yeah, is that Kobayashi does not let you enjoy a film
No.
ever. And I mean, I did not obviously, because we only do one film by a director, so we could not put the human condition in here. But he has a 3-part series called The Human Condition, each of which the movies are like 3-4 hours long. I think it's longer than the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Dang.
And it stars Tatsuya Nakadai, and it's very specifically just
Umbrage
the most
taken.
aggressive.
I have umbrage taken it with the fact that you say Kobayashi doesn't let people enjoy films, because my favorite Kobayashi film I enjoyed very much, Kodan,
Oh,
is
yeah.
a delicious anthology of
Isn't it supposed to be
classic horror stories.
Really uncomfortable.
No, some of the stories are uncomfortable, and some of them are incredibly sweet, and some of them are just fun horror. It has one of my favorite action sequences
Fun
in any movie
horror?
ever. I like horror
You have to be
movies.
somebody who likes
Okay.
horror to feel that way.
True,
is my
but
point.
there is a scene in that movie that is my favorite fight scene of all time. One of them, because it is silly, it is ridiculous, it is stagey, and it is unwatchable. You have to watch it when it is on the screen because it's a big classic historical fight as one man fights through an entire army on these tiny little boats that are floating in the water, and most of the people he just pushes off. He's just running. He's running down with chaos and energy to get to his lost love, and he's just pushing people out of the way, and
So
they're falling into the water.
It's like the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi.
It almost is.
George Lucas has definitely watched these movies.
Well,
is my point.
Kobayashi strikes me as someone. His action sequences, all of the ones I've seen, aren't cool. They're kind of ridiculous in a small way because they're so dancey and they're so minimal compared to especially a lot of the just so extra fight sequences we see in America with guns and explosions and stuff. Even the
Hey, there were
sword
guns in
fights.
this one though.
Oh, there
It's
were
true.
guns in this one.
And I have a thought about
Oh,
that,
he
but it
got
doesn't-
shot. But
Tell me
no.
your thought.
Okay, well, I mean, I just think the fact I think that's another parallel, notably between this movie and Seven Samurai. The use of guns in killing off samurai feels like this invasion or this wrong that's committed in a weird way because there's what can you do to fight up against a gun when you're at the other end of a room and somebody's pointing a gun at you. But the thing is it happens in Seven Samurai, and in my view of Seven Samurai, that's kind of his referencing westernization of look at here, all 4 samurai that die in this film are shot by rifles.
Except
None
in
of
this
them are cut down.
in Harakiri, how I read it, at least, I don't know if this played this way to you. At that point, he's holding the Shogun's armor, right? The red armor, and he has it in front of him, and they have the guns pointed at him, and it's oh, he can use that to deflect the bullets, or at least protect himself somewhat. But instead, he lifts above his head and throws it on the ground. And he's like, I don't care. I'm making a statement here, then runs into the back wall and immediately cuts his gut open and gets shot.
I don't think historically the armor wouldn't have done anything to protect against bullets. I think the whole point was they were stopping there because they didn't want him to desecrate the armor further, and then he
yes.
trashed it because
in that sense, he was being protected by the armor because they weren't going to shoot the armor because the armor is a fetish
Okay.
for them
Yeah,
in
that's
not the American sense, but in the traditional sense. It is like an object of power, an object of reverence that has taken on a meaning beyond the object. It is the soul and
it's
the
a
symbol.
synecdoche.
Yes,
Yeah.
of which you did not mention the Charlie Kaufman film.
It's just everything has
Whoop-de-doo.
to come back to my thesis because that's specifically what I was writing about today. Was the way that swords and in the case of Ikiru Watanabe's hat are these synecdoches that are symbolizing the entirety of the samurai and Bushido. In this movie, we have that same thing that Kurosawa likes to use a lot, except in this case, it's the Shogun armor, in which case the victory is in desecrating it rather than in Seven Samurai. These symbols live on after the death of their heroes and are this kind of symbol of, even though their victory is not recognized by the people around them, the symbol of their duty fulfilled lives on. So again, you have this weird dichotomy between the two directors where, they're sort of talking about the same thing, but sort of not, because Kobayashi's burn the whole thing to the ground, and Kurosawa's no, what if we did honor and Bushido and loyalty and duty and responsibility and all these things, but we did it in a way that actually cared about humans? What if this source of what is honorable and dutiful is what is objectively right, not what is considered, good by society.
I
And-
wonder-
Both.
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
sorry. You go.
Oh, I was just going to comment on the structure of the film and how it bookends itself. So it starts the same way that it ends, with the armor and the smoke and the book being opened or closed. And I feel like, I don't know, I wonder, this is an unfinished statement, obviously, if the director is saying, burn it all down, we don't need any of these structures, they're not honorable, they're murdering people, but it's almost like all of that revolution is contained solely within that film, and as soon as it's done, the book is closed, the armor is back in its place, the end.
It's like the damage has been done, and they
Yeah.
know that now. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing they can do to fix that. It's just there. The
Well-
damage has been done, and they have been shown that everything that they believe is just as hollow as the armor, and yet they just continue the farce anyway. Now they're no longer these children who are just, blindly following these rules. They're now actively choosing to follow it in spite of the fact that they know that it's meaningless.
Yeah.
Taking the like bizarre step of like command them to commit harakiri, but also the public story is that they will have died from illness. It's like, okay, weird.
Yeah.
It's an admission of, well, it's not an admission of guilt, but it's an admission that, like, this is all farcical,
What-
and they are forced to do that. And so that's how he wins, is really just by, he forces them to kill him with guns, not in honorable combat, not proving themselves in any way. He desecrates, I mean, you can even see in the set, I feel like, of the compound, he like rips his way through that. It's destroyed. Even literally, like, the building itself is destroyed by him. None of it has any meaning anymore, and he's forced them to take all of these extra actions on top of having to fight him, is not considered honorable in their code.
With the metaphor of the book, though, too, this is a period piece. It's sort of like looking back, and a bunch of people today in America make the argument, why do we need to talk about slavery? It happened. It's over now. And in some case, yes, that period of time, the book is closed. We cannot change it. But that happened, and the fact that those systems existed and those systems kept existing and were able to cover up a lot of the horrific things they did.
I mean, the book doesn't tell the truth.
Yeah, it
truth.
impacts it. The book of history has lies in it that we have just accepted, and we need to go back and question our preconceptions. And what do we think of the samurai? What do we think of the early America peoples?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's ultimately why a lot of these directors would come around and say that they hate Kurosawa, because Kurosawa's whole thing was like, hey, how about, like, we just kind of change the way that we're doing this? And they're like, but do you not recognize that these are symbols of cruelty and disgusting, horrible things? These are inherently wrong, and our society continues to fetishize and idealize Bushido despite all of this. I mean, look at where it got us in World War II, for example. So, yeah, I agree. Good point.
chill. Chill. Chill.
Do we have
Rat
any other thoughts?
times.
Oh, Hunter, what do you think of the pacing of the film? We didn't vote on this yet.
Pacing good.
It did not drag in the first hour.
I
for
mean,
you?
I would probably agree that it does get its slowest just in the middle, just because, like, boy, it starts off heavy and it ends heavy. So of course in the middle, like, just kind of objectively has the least, like, well, I don't know, maybe that's bad to say. It doesn't have anything wild happening as much in the middle.
True.
The impact of, like, watching a guy be forced to kill himself, and then also, I don't know, I feel like the big moment in the end is almost more just the fun catharsis of seeing him toss the top notes out and stuff like that, or just
Yeah.
like those things. And then all the stuff in the middle is like, okay, we're gonna bring it all together and bridge these and make the ending really satisfying.
It feels super plotting in the middle.
You
Like
kinda-
like a
the ending doesn't work.
like
Not at all.
Knives Out almost, like
Kinda.
one of those types of, like, whodunit films where you can tell, like, the pieces are getting put together
Yeah.
and this mystery's being set up and
Right.
it's being revealed slowly, but
Yeah.
you're just kind of
Like,
in that drip feed phase.
It's engaging enough, but yeah, like, a lot of it is just like, and then the baby was sick, and then it got more sick, and I was sad. I don't know.
It's sad for baby though.
It was sad.
That part worked for me.
Yeah.
I think the part that dragged more was when they're like painting umbrellas and the guy's like,
Uh-huh.
you should make your daughter marry this guy.
Uh-huh.
That's where I was coming.
That's the part I'm talking about right there.
Okay.
It's fair.
I
Which-
have such problems. That's the part when I like really started paying attention again for some reason, because I've been doing a bunch of other stuff because I've seen this movie so many times.
See, I was just thinking about the whole time through the umbrella part is how much I like Demons, to my favorite samurai movie or anti-samurai movie. I don't know. It's the closest thing I've ever seen in samurai films to a noir horror. It was made in like the 70s or 80s, and it looks like it was made in like the 50s or 60s, and it's great. It's also directed by the guy who did Funeral Parade of Roses, and you can only watch it on YouTube because reality is broken.
Is it at least a good copy?
It's a good enough copy.
Nice.
It's black and white. You don't need all that much fidelity. It's like crushed blacks. And there's umbrellas, and there are good shots with umbrellas. Oh my God, I love that movie so much.
Shout out to just the fact that Tatsuya Nakadai's performance is good. It's a complete detour.
Well, of course.
He's
That's
really
one of the best
good.
pieces of movie acting I've ever seen.
It's awesome, and he's great, and it almost makes me mad sometimes, because he's good in so many things, yet he's not Toshido Mifune, and it upsets me later because in his later career he became Kurosawa's golden boy as well, and was the lead in his final films, and was just very obviously not as good as you can tell that Toshido Mifune would have been in those roles. Like, you could still tell Kurosawa's writing for Mifune. But he has a good one here. Kobayashi's the person who like discovered him. He was like working as a waiter or something, and Kobayashi's like, you look like you'd be good at acting. And then Tatsuya Nakadai became like sort of the actor of Japan. Like, he's still alive and he's still acting now.
This
he
is
was,
a really
he was
stupid
in
question,
Seven Samurai.
but which person are we talking about?
The main guy.
The main dude?
Tsugumo.
Thank you.
The
Yes.
intense dude.
I am fully tracking his
Much
performance. Was
intense.
incredible.
Good beard too. He
He's
looks
good
so he has one of those faces where he can just do any role and just completely transform and be unrecognizable. I mean, actually, I think he might be the only actor here on our list who's worked with 3 different directors on the list, because he worked with Kurosawa, he worked with Kobayashi, and way later we'll get to he worked with Takahata. I don't think he's in Grave of the Fireflies, but he did work with.
Tale of Princess Kaguya.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've been meaning to
Somehow
watch that
in like
forever.
2011
Oh, that's on my
he was
list.
voice acting. This
I
guy,
mean, you don't need much physical mobility for voice acting. You just need the breath within your lungs.
I know, and he has
He's,
such good breath.
His last credit. His last
good
credit.
point.
on
Great
Letterboxd
breath.
is from 2019.
The wind beneath
Maybe
your
he-
pigeon wings.
He is. I really like him, and when you look at interviews with him, he dresses up like he's Elton John or something. Like, he's just, I don't know why, but he just dresses up like super to
The
the
dazzly?
to the nines. It's great.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's so sweet.
it's fantastic.
Although, okay, we're having a great time, but I think it's time to
We
powder
should
this
wrap
puff
up.
pastry.
Mhm.
We don't have that much time left.
Had to be a
Such
short
good.
one today. We got to
Uh,
the big stuff pretty quickly. I
I
feel
think
like.
so.
We kind of did. We started off immediately,
Yeah.
as this film does.
Can I put
Indeed.
in my one last note in 30
Yeah.
seconds?
What was it?
We
I guess.
before had talked about a little bit before the podcast started about the sound, and I just want to say that Kobayashi's like use of very like dramatic silence to like very loud scenes going back and forth like that. I also want to say is like expressly like Kurosawa's trademark, and so I just want to mention that as well. My point with all of this was to say, because I'm a stan, that despite the fact that this movie would disagree with Kurosawa's points in a lot of ways and does a lot of, very different things, ultimately it literally couldn't have been made without Kurosawa's influence. Kurosawa is kind of the reason why samurai films started getting political to begin with, and so that's why something like this is allowed to exist, and he even takes these sorts of things from him. So there you
Good
go.
word.
before we can
Indeed.
go, the sadist in me requires that we all eat sweet treats in front of Anna,
Oh no.
That's so mean.
who is half a continent away and cannot enjoy them with us.
I also can't have gluten or dairy, so
See, that's what I was
a
saying when we were
problem.
gonna get.
it's
he was
okay.
like, "We're gonna send
Wait.
donuts out," and I'm like, "No, we're
Actually,
not."
Yeah.
Let's just destroy the audio.
Yes.
Who cares?
There you go. Yep. Here's your ASMR time.
As we all know, it is great etiquette to eat on mic, and I'm very
I believe it's
adequate
pronounced
at
ectoquit.
eating on the Mac.
Extra
Yeah, man.
Equated. You have to say both T's.
Acquitted.
Acquitted. Okay. Anyway, donut.
equestrian.
That's my last thought. Is donut. Ratings. We probably all like this movie. Thought it was good.
Real good.
That's a thought.
1 star.
This movie made me decide that I need to change my rating scale, so stay tuned.
Ooh, fun.
Chill.
Because you can't give this 5 stars even though it's perfect.
Yeah, I would give it like maybe 2.5. But I feel like that's unfair to this movie, so I need to change my rating
Despite the
scale.
fact that it's really good, just
Just
because
a really
it hurts.
harsh rating. scale.
Move to a completely subjective rating scale like
Well,
me.
that's what it was. That my rating scale was entirely just like I liked it. It was good. I mean, I put more thought into it than that, but now I'm like, okay, I need to change it to include movies that are masterpieces, even though they were painful.
Yeah. Put a masochism clause in there where you're like, it hurt me, but it made me feel something.
I like it.
I gave Dead Poet Society 4 stars, so
You don't have to do that. No one's making you do that.
I know.
I
It
gave
deserves
Dead
it.
Poet Society 3 stars.
It deserves 4.
Maybe I don't change my. We'll see. I read Tim. Shout out to Tim again. I read his rating scale on Letterboxd, and I was like, I love that. So
It's fun.
Yeah.
anyway, on that note, I really have to go. So
Alrighty,
bye,
have a
guys.
good time. See ya.
Bye.
All right, I guess we can just wrap up now.
Yeah.
I give 4.5 again.
4.5.
It's good.
We have a
It's-
quote.
It's above average.
It's a good rating.
I pulled up the quotes page from IMDb because I'm
Yes.
useless.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we'll close out with, as we say at the end of every episode of the thing when we end the thing.
It's hard because
And-
there's just like, there's like the one quote that's like a really easy pick. But then there's like other ones that are just not as
At the end
good.
of the day, when we
Here,
say the things.
I can basically turn
We
this
say
in-
the things.
I could
No.
go like
Yum,
other
yum.
ones and just keep it like an
Yum.
advice bit. Like what's the big tip? The words of wisdom and advice from the movie. That can be my thing.
Okay.
And in this case, you could say it's now I'm trying to pick. Swordsmanship untested in battle is like the art of swimming, mastered on land.
I figured you were going to go with that
Yeah.
one.
It's very practical. You can use it
Yeah.
in your everyday life.
Yeah.
Good times.
Consider this
Mhm.
and take use.
Cool.
or
The
something.
end. I hope you
Sorry.
hope you like ASMR.
Whee!
Oh boy.
I'm gonna probably trim these down. Maybe. I don't
Oh, you
know.
can.
Mhm.
Just overlay it. Put it in and double it. Put
I'm
over
gonna
the whole
put-
episode.
Put like an echo thing on them.
Oh,
Yeah.
just put just a massive amount of like do both distortion and like reverb and delay. Just make it just
right.
fucked. Yeah.
People do
Okay.
that. I
Make
kind
it
of like that
endless.
actually.
Distortion?
Not distortion, I guess, but delay.
Yeah, delay's
used in
fine,
ASMR
but
is
adding
cool.
distortion would just make it more painful.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
We know our
Maybe-
audience. We know they like pain. They
could
listen
put it
to
as
us.
a-
They gotta like the pain.
Put it as an aside at the end. Anyway,
Yeah, let's go with
I
it.
guess that's the
All right, cool. That's the end. Bye. I refuse.
No, remember you promised you'd get hyped up if I took you to a hockey game.
Yeah. But
And I
my,
would say, get hyped up, and you
It's-
would go, yeah!
my version of being hyped up would be like, oh, look at him. Look at him.
You know, the person who sits at metal shows.
Yeah.
That vibe.
me.
No, that's, yeah. Do you sit at metal shows?
I would if I could.
That's
Mhm.
fair.
I don't care about being in the crowd at all.
My ideal metal show would involve me editing something else in the corner while the metal show is happening.
You're
I'm
like
not
on
really
the
a concert
computer.
person. Oh yeah,
It's
no.
literally an I'm not like
Just
other
being a
girls
sound
complex.
person. Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry.
He looks out in the crowd and he sees me and I'm different from other girls. I'm reading a book in the crowd.
Exactly.
I mean, hey, Jessica Dobson noticed that I was different than the other girls because I was the only person there who liked her band.
I mean, that does set you apart.
Yikes.
Well, it's just that she wasn't headlining and everybody was there for a majorly popular band. And so it was very obvious that nobody
Cared.
even knew who Deep Sea Diver was despite them like playing in their hometown.
Oh.
It was weird because I like traveled out of town. Anyway, it's fine. It's good. Anyway, we can probably start an episode now if we want
Yeah.
to, theoretically.
Anytime now.
Okay.
Anytime? No.